Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Radio Europa. I'm your host, William, and today I'm joined by Laura, who's hosted a few times in the last few weeks, and Alessandro from Italy. We've got a couple of topics we want to talk about today. Of course, the Syria intervention, which has been quite hot in the news this week, and also because it's coming up to the 50th anniversary, we're going to discuss Enoch Powell Rivers' of Blood speech. There's been a lot of drama about that in the English press. But first, we are going to focus on Syria. I'm going to bring Alessandro in a minute on that one. And there's a number of talking points about that. You've got the issue of, is it America's place to intervene? How does that impact on us, et cetera, et cetera. So what I'll do, Alessandro, just your thoughts on the whole situation and a brief overview, if you can.
Hey, of course, with pleasure. So we all know what happened in Syria. Trump decided to bomb it again, basically almost after a year of the previous bombing, and with the help of the United Kingdom government and also the French military. The 3 sites were bombed. Allegedly, according to the Western press, they were like some strategic targets, like chemical weapons factories and research places and universities. But according to Syrian and Russian sources, basically only civilians got bombed. And luckily, there were no deaths, even among civilians, only 3 wounded. So that's a good thing, because the Russian and Syrian AA weapons managed to shut down, I guess, 70% or something of the missiles, rockets sent by the Americans. So that was good. But the problem is that what Trump did is something that shows that they have an agenda. And even though Trump has campaigned as some kind of anti-war candidate, which is one of the main reasons why he got elected, he spent years and years during the Obama presidency saying Obama shouldn't go to Syria, get out of Syria. We are fighting and helping ISIS. And then he flipped. We all know why he did, because there are many lobbies in America. And NATO, as always, with, of course, the English and the French in the first line, have backed the American choice to bomb Syria again. And this has been very dangerous, because we know how serious Russia is about this. And Putin has been openly saying that there will be repercussions. This time, Russia will not stand down. So I'll say that we kind of got lucky this time, because nothing big happened, but the situation could easily still escalate.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a fair assessment. I mean, in the past, Russia has not always stood up to the plate, but it seems this time he finally got a bit of pushback against this American intervention, and a big power has actually stood up and said, we're not going to let you do it so easily this time. And I think that's positive, but it's dangerous, like you said, because there could be repercussions. And I mean, God forbid, if a Russian installation had got hit, then we could be looking at a very different situation today. But on that point, I think you mentioned about civilian targets. I think I saw, there's a Lebanese journalist, Sarah Abdullah, on Twitter, and then Partisan Girl, the Syrian girl, who's quite big on Twitter as well. They claimed from their sources that they knew that one of the targets, which is allegedly a chemical weapons facility, is actually a university.
I saw the pictures and how beautiful it looked, and full of students, and then all the ruins and destruction. And that picture itself with the destroyed university really shows what America does everywhere it goes. It doesn't create anything, just bring chaos and destruction. And
it's destabilization.
And once again, they broke international law. And I know this is getting boring, because every single time we say this, but America, NATO, but mostly America and Israel always get away with it. They always break international law. They always attack without, following the basic rules, and they get away with it. Because let's not forget that the American government never declared war on Syria, meaning that they attacked them without a declaration of war, without actually consulting the United Nations, so without even consulting Congress, I think. There are so many infringements of laws, and it just doesn't make any sense how they get away with it. Shows how much power they have, and how much, being part of things like NATO and the UN doesn't make any sense unless you're the stronger one, because in that moment you will be able to do whatever you want.
Well, that's the problem. It's all about might is right, isn't it? In their eyes. Yeah. I think the question I really want to pose is, of course, I think we can all agree it was it shouldn't have happened. It was unnecessary, and it could have had serious repercussions in terms of geopolitical strategy and world peace. I know it sounds dramatic, but the other question, I guess, is how's this going to impact us in Europe? Because all I can see is it's going to create more pretext for a big flow of refugees from the region.
Yeah, but this refugee thing about Syria makes no sense, and it's just full of hypocrisy. Because if you're pro-refugee, you are pro-human rights. Like they always talk about this human rights thing, and that means that you don't want people to be displaced, bombed. Then why would you support such a thing? Because in the end, who's getting bombed is civilians. Yeah, of course, if the war escalates once again, this time we're going to get real refugees, not like the fake ones we're getting now. And there will be a huge problem, because there will be like no way to actually slow down the influx of migrants. But when it comes to the human rights question, which I also wrote an article about, you can see like the full extent of the hypocrisy of Americans, the American government, because these people are exploiting the alleged deaths of children and women to basically condemn Assad as the, I guess, Arab Hitler or something, and which is the same thing they did with Saddam Hussein, where they claimed he had chemical weapons, which of course he didn't have, but that's not the story. And they all do these things about human rights, but then America is selling weapons to Saudi Arabia, weapons and missiles and bombs that are being used to kill children and women in Yemen. So if women and children die and it can be exploited, hell yeah, human rights. But if those people are being killed by your allies, you're just going to look away. This kind of hypocrisy is disgusting, it's despicable. Or just look at Israel. Israel killed, 30, 50 Palestinians in the last weeks, and nobody's batting an eye. Yeah, of course, you will read some articles about it, but will something change? Of course not. Will someone bomb Israel for this? Will someone give sanctions, or do anything? Nothing. The hypocrisy is disgusting.
It's comical, isn't it, that if you talk about sanctions on Israel, like the BDS campaign, you're an anti-Semite. But if you talk about sanctions on Syria and Iran, then they say, oh, you're not doing enough. You need to go and bomb these people.
Exactly. And when that's something like these people that are asking for war are not just the regular boomers, neocons. Okay, we're used to them being, warmongers that just want to see the whole world burning and want to feed the American war machine. We know that. We know these people. They've been doing that for 30 years. We shouldn't be surprised. But what is shocking is the fact that being anti-war is becoming a right-wing thing, a nationalist thing. And I find it very ironic. But seeing all these liberals saying, hell yeah, bomb them. And why do they do this? Why? Because they're sheep. Because Syria is backed by Russia, and liberals in America have been lobotomized and brainwashed into believing that Russia is literally plotting to destroy everything they love. So even though they hate Trump, because they do hate Trump, they hate Russia more. So if Trump's going to do something to Russia, they will approve it. And Trump knows that. And he knows that if he appeases neocons and some liberals, he will be fine, because they will not shut down his government again. And they would probably be less annoying about things like that, DECA, maybe the wall, who knows? I mean, we don't know what Trump is thinking. And I'm certain he doesn't want to bomb Syria in his heart, because after all the years he has spent being anti-war, he doesn't flip like that. I'm sure he's being forced, and I'm sure that he means well for the country. But still, he's not doing enough. He's being too weak. And things have to change.
Yeah, it does seem like it was a tactical. I mean, you've got to say with even Trump, he's got a consistent track record of the only thing that he's been really 100% consistent on all the time is that foreign intervention in these wars is not the right thing to do. So it does seem amazing that he would go in now. But there's actually, I mean, I'm no expert on American law, and this is a bit of an aside, but I was listening to something about the Patriot Act, which, as everybody will know, was passed by George Bush's administration in the aftermath of 9/11. And apparently, this is kind of comical, really, but apparently it widely expanded what constitutes an act of aggression against America. So, for instance, having dealings with the Iranian state bank is considered an act of aggression against America. So I think that's how they bypass Congress, is by using this expanded definition. So anything that Assad does is considered this act of aggression against, the world power.
If you think about it, even just the existence of Syria is an aggression towards American supremacy, because Syria is one of those countries who said no to the petrodollar.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's the dollar. Yeah.
Yeah, and the fact that Syria is fucking with the dollar is a pattern. Why is Syria being attacked by Americans? It's not the first time they do this. Iraq, Libya, all these countries said fuck you to the dollar. And what happened to them? They got attacked. Their regimes got destroyed and their leaders got killed. Because whoever doesn't follow the American petrodollar is the enemy.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're seeing with Iran as well, is that I know they've teamed up with Moscow to try and find an alternative, international trading currency. So I think that's where a lot of the hostility towards them comes from. But it is curious that, I mean, like you said, the liberals, I don't think that they appreciate the deeper significance. I think they genuinely believe this chemical weapons bullshit, basically, but they've been,
because they want to believe it, because they say they say that Russia's ally did it, therefore they're gonna believe it. These people, as long as they see Russia in the sentence, in the article, they're going to believe it. That's how brainwashed they are.
Yeah, of course, and that's sort of been that hostility towards Russia is being quite cleverly exploited by the neocons who, I mean, let's face it, neocons, they don't care about the rights of Syrians. They care about the dollar. They care about American power.
They don't care about human lives, not even American lives. Why should they care? All they care is money and, well, their Zionist views. I mean, look at Bolton. Bolton, that has been just assigned as home security or something like that. He gets assigned as that role. They just bombed Syria, and that guy is, for example, last year during a conference called Free Iran or something, he said by 2019 we're gonna have a regime change in Iran. But the thing is, Russia will not allow it, and America is really pushing Russia. They're really risking it, because Russia might not be as powerful as America, but China will not stay as a spectator. They will do something, either economically or even militarily, but they will do something to back Russia, because nobody likes America. Let's be serious. Nobody likes them. Nobody wants to help them, even by any chance. Like the Chinese will be helping America, just spectating, but they won't. Even if like tomorrow some kind of war breaks out because of Syria, I'm sure China will help Russia. Not because they have good ties between them, but you see, the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Exactly, yeah, and we know that regardless of how well President Xi and Donald Trump might get on, I think America will always be seen as the enemy in China and in Russia and in Iran, and these are not small countries; these are powerful countries. But I guess that kind of leads us nicely to the logical conclusion of the topic, which I suppose you've got a pattern emerging now where we've essentially got another Cold War. That's where we are, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, especially what will the European Union? Well, we know the European Union will back America, but in terms of where certain individual states will put their
let's talk about that. Let's think about, for example, what happened in our countries, Italy and the United Kingdom. Your country, as always, is backing whatever America does. Italy decided not to act, mostly because we don't really have a government right now. But I have some good news for the so-called anti-war front, which we are part of. The leader of Lega Nord, or just Lega, it's called Lega now, Matteo Salvini, openly stated that he's against war, that there is no proof Assad did it, and even though he doesn't back Assad openly, he's basically saying that war is a mistake, and there is no need for more wars and suffering. And that's a very big, important statement, because Salvini, at the moment, is the strongest nationalist politician in Italy. And after Salvini, Giorgia Meloni, which is the second nationalist politician that has quite a lot of votes, like around 6-7%, no, actually less, 5-6, and she's together with Salvini in the coalition. She also condemned the American attack. This is showing that the anti-American sentiment is growing in Europe among nationalists. I'm certain many other nationalists, even like the more moderate one, kind of condemn this. So I wouldn't say that every single European country will instantly back a possible war against Russia or even Syria.
Yeah, well, I hope not. And it's interesting because you mentioned Italy, and obviously my country, the United Kingdom, was directly involved in the military action, which, by the way, everybody, I do apologise for on our behalf. But there was a recent poll taken just after the strikes, and I think it was 78% of British people said they don't support the government. So I think even though our politicians in this country are banging the drums for war and they're, follow America come what may, the general public doesn't support this. So it may be the case that as this situation develops, that you might find a UK government with a totally different approach in the future, which, would be quite interesting for the wider, geopolitical landscape.
Yeah, but when it comes to UK, the problematic thing is that beyond Farage, nobody even dared to say anything among politicians against the strike. Both the Conservatives and many in the Labour establishment were basically saying, yeah, let's fucking bomb Syria. I mean, Corbyn did say something. Of course, he did.
Yeah, Corbyn was against it, yeah.
But that's it, Corbyn and Farage, which of course they're very important, but they're not enough. And especially when it comes to the Conservatives, they're probably the weakest right wing, if they can be called right wing, party in the European scene. Like, I remember you tweeting something at some Conservative MP that was tweeting things about how based the Indian legal immigrants are. Like, these people are supposed to be the Conservatives, and they're praising non-European migrants coming here, taking our jobs. It's because that's the thing. Like, Indian migrants that are coming from India, the legal ones, are people that have studies, are engineers. They're not taking the basic jobs that it's still a problem, of course, for the working class. But these people are gonna disrupt even like the middle class.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not like there is no good migration. There is no good migration. That's not like people that call themselves conservatives but support legal migration are fake. They're just fake conservatives. And this is what the Conservative Party Tories are in the UK for me.
That's absolutely right. They're a total disgrace. And actually, in terms of political positioning, they call themselves conservatives, but they're probably about, where Barack Obama is. They're slightly
liberals. They're liberals. Yeah. Like in the UK, the two main parties are basically liberals and communists, and then you have UKIP and for Britain, who are basically nothing for now. It doesn't look good. And especially, like, I used to believe that one of the representatives of the Conservatives, Mogg, was actually decent. But after his, refusal and condemnation of Enoch Powell Rivers in his speech, Rivers of Blood, I dropped him. I used to believe that he was good. He was the only good one. But to be fair, if a Conservative doesn't acknowledge what Powell did, they are not worth being voted.
Well, exactly, and it was an interesting point that we can pick up a bit more in the second segment. But you're right about Jacob Rees-Mogg, and that's the thing about this Conservative government is that they all support this military intervention in Syria. They're basically like the boomer neocon party. It's like a bunch of liberal John Boltons. It's terrible. It really is terrible in this country.
It is.
I mean, just as some closing thoughts, is there anything else you'd like to add about the situation with Syria?
No, I think we covered all the main points. I mean, the American hypocrisy, the role of Israel, and overall the fact that Syria is a great country that has been fighting terrorists from both the US side, back terrorists, and ISIS, and has been winning also thanks to Russia's efforts. And I had the occasion to, talk to various Syrian nationalists. One of them also helped me in the composition of one of my latest articles about the Social-Nationalist Syrian Party, SNP. And this guy goes on Twitter by the Real Jack the Bad. And he's a very smart guy. You should totally follow him if you want to know stuff from Syria from a Syrian point of view, from a Syrian nationalist point of view.
Yeah.
And these people really care about their country. They love their country. And Syria is probably the most beautiful and the most advanced country in the Middle East. They have, excluding Israel, the highest instruction levels in the Middle East. They have a multi-religious country where different groups live together in harmony without repercussion. And overall history, the history of Syria is beautiful. Like they have some of the oldest churches and temples. Sadly, some of them have been destroyed by ISIS. And a sane person will never want to see Syria burning under American bombs.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're right about the history and heritage of Syria. I think there's a lot of mention of Syria, even in biblical stories. So it's sad to see what's happening there. And of course, our intervention in wars there won't exactly help things. Will only help the terrorists. So yeah, it would be a great shame. But okay, then. So I think we'll wrap up that topic now. In a minute, we're going to talk about Enoch Powell's speech, the repercussions that are still being felt 50 years later, and so on and so forth. So we'll just take a quick break, and then we'll be straight back to you with the second half.
Hey guys, welcome back to our podcast. So this Friday, on the 20th of April 2018, it is the 50th anniversary of Enoch Powell's Rivers of Blood speech. And just to give a little bit of background for those of you who aren't based in the UK who maybe don't know about this speech, this was a speech that was done in Birmingham on the 20th of April 1968 by Enoch Powell, who was a Conservative MP. And this is back when MPs were something to aspire to, not like today with Diane Abbott and David Lammy and Sadiq Khan. But Enoch Powell was a classical scholar. He graduated from Cambridge University with a double first. He wrote about 30 books. He could speak a ton of languages. He was a brigadier in the British Army. And he gave this speech about, it strongly criticised mass immigration in the UK. And he spoke about specific stories from his constituents who, people who had got in touch with him and kind of told him that, there was an elderly lady who had wrote a letter to him and said that she was the only white person living on her streets. So he basically spoke about the total transformation of Britain and how white people were likely to become a minority in the future. So we're just going to play a clip for a couple of minutes, which is a few words from his speech.
In this country, in 15 or 20 years' time, the black man will have the whip hand over the white man. Well, I can already hear the chorus of execration. How dare I say such a horrible thing? How dare I stir up trouble and inflame feelings by repeating such a conversation? My answer is that I do not have the right not to do so.
The discrimination and the deprivation, the sense of alarm and of resentment lie not with the immigrant population, but with those among whom they have come and are still coming. This is why to enact legislation of the kind before Parliament at this moment is to risk throwing a match onto gunpowder.
Those whom the gods wish to destroy, they first make mad. We must be mad, literally mad as a nation, to be permitting the annual inflow of some 50,000 dependents who are, for the most part, the material of the future growth of the immigrant-descended population. It is like watching a nation busily engaged in heaping up its own funeral pyre.
So that was Enoch Powell Rivers of Blood speech, or part of it, which was from the 20th of April 1968. So one thing to mention from Enoch Powell's speech is that he predicted that by the year 2000 in Britain, around 10% of the population would be non-white. In 2011, which was our last census date, it was around 14% of the population that was non-white. So he's pretty much spot on, to be honest. One thing that I don't think even Powell would have predicted was that, I mean, London is, white British people are a minority in London. They're around 45%. And that's not unique just to London. There are tons of towns and cities across Britain where white people are already a minority. So I think the only mistake that Powell made really was that he didn't realise how bad that it would get. But one thing that we wanted to talk about was that there was a broadcast yesterday where the BBC read out the entirety of Enoch Powell's speech. And it kind of divided the nation a little bit because the liberal media were saying, as they do, you know, you can't show this, you can't play this, it's racist. But other people were coming out, people who agreed with it were coming out and saying, no, it's a good speech, you should be showing it. But also people that disagreed with it were coming out and saying, you should be showing it anyway because, you know, it shows how bad someone once was. What do you guys think of? Do you have anything to add, William, about maybe why the BBC? I'm surprised that the BBC decided to do that. Actually, what do you think?
Well, as to why they did it, I think there's two reasons. I think number one, everybody says that they're a left-wing organisation, so it just strikes me as maybe them trying to pretend that they're something like neutral, which of course we know is a lie. But the other thing I did think of, and this might be a bit conspiratorial, excuse me, but I think every now and then the state likes to put out some feelers to gauge opinion, and I think this is a good one to maybe for them to get a feeler of how many people actually still agree with this sort of thing, and you know, for them, how much work do they need to do to put it back in the box, as it were. The only other thing I can think of is that they wanted to do it to, you know, as they do, and then get a load of non-white people to ring up and say how scared they are and how threatened they feel, and you know, the typical stuff that makes liberals wet their pants.
Yeah.
So that's just my opinion, but as to why they've done it, it's really hard to say.
Yeah, I'm wondering if they've done it so that they can kind of, I mean, we say that they're so liberal, don't we? I wonder if they've kind of done that so that is one thing that they can fall back on and sort of say, well, we showed Enoch Powell's speech, we're not that bad. I wonder if they're kind of trying to balance the scales a little bit by showing it. But at the time when Powell did do the speech, the people in the room pretty much agreed with him, and a poll was done of British people just after the speech, and 74% of people said that they agreed with Powell's speech and what he said. And actually 30 years later, another poll was done in 1998, and 64% of people agreed with him. I think you kind of expect it to drop a little bit because political correctness is considerably on the rise all the time. But the majority of the public did agree with him and say that he wasn't racist.
Well, yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that because, well, I mean, a couple of years ago now, when I was campaigning for the EU referendum, we spoke to a lot of people in the street, and I did, a street stall every Saturday and whatever. And the most common thing that people said to us in the street, they used to come over to us in the street and be like, yeah, I'm voting Leave. Enoch Powell's right. Best Prime Minister we never had. And there's still so much support for him out there. It's really staggering.
Yeah, we should have a statue of this guy in London. Everything that he said came true, and that's why I don't understand why people can be offended at it, because where's the lie? Like, he was ahead of his time, really. And I mean, he even said in the speech, I don't have the right not to say this. I'm not going to leave it up to future generations to speak about it. I don't see why you can be outraged at something that's true, to be honest. What do you think of Jacob Rees-Mogg kind of doing a 180 and saying that he doesn't agree with it?
Oh, well, I think he's just going back to, he's showing himself to be a typical conservative, isn't he? I mean, the Conservative Party they'll pretend to be the voice of the silent majority until they're not. Until then, they go back to the neoliberal political correctness, virtue signalling. And I think it's just Jacob Rees-Mogg giving everybody a reality call so that, and everybody's suddenly starting to realise, hang on a minute, this guy isn't as based or red or whatever you want to say as we thought,
Yeah. Lots of people have disavowed him. I know we joke about disavowing, but lots of people have. It just feels like he was like the shining light in the Conservative Party, and it feels like he's kind of turned his back on the real issues now. I know Farage supports the speech. He spoke about it before. I know he agrees with it, but Farage is like the only guy that we have in the UK saying the right things sometimes, isn't it? Pretty
much, yeah. And actually, I listened to a speech Farage gave in Washington. Oh, it must have been maybe 10 years ago. And he said, it's interesting because he didn't explicitly say he agreed, but he said Enoch Powell's, and I think you might agree with this, he said that Enoch Powell's problem was that he got the flag of public opinion and took it too far. And he said what you need to do is to take it a little bit at a time and wait for people to come to you and then go a bit further. And I think Enoch Powell's problem was that he took it so far all in one go that it gave the media and the political class the opportunity to basically ruin him and to say, look at this horrible fascist or whatever they say. So I think you're right, Farage agrees. And I think Farage is also right in that Powell should have had a little more political savvy. He was a bit naive at the time.
Yeah, it's about shifting the window, isn't it? And talking about topics that are maybe a little bit edgy, but they're okay to talk about. And edging towards that openness about those topics. So I think that so do you have anything else to say about that?
Well, the only thing I would say, I know we've played a little clip of the speech on this episode, but I really would urge anybody who's got an interest in this you'll find fragmented clips on YouTube. You can find the full text in a number of articles. I really would urge you to go and read it or listen to it. Listen preferably, because he had a great voice. Because the guy, it was like he had a crystal ball. Everything he said was just, the only criticism is things are now worse than he said. So yeah, that's the last thing I'm going to say is if you can, go and listen to it.
Yeah, and over the course of the week and certainly on Friday, which is the actual anniversary, we have an article coming out at Defend Europa about Powell and his speech, okay. And we'll also be showing graphics throughout the day, the usual graphics that we show with his quotes on.
Yeah, fantastic. So I think it's going to be an interesting week. Lots of liberal tears, I hope.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Okay, so that wraps it up nicely for episode 4. as ever, we're going to have links to a couple of articles at the bottom. You can subscribe, give us a thumbs up. We really do appreciate it. And of course, we're all volunteers. We do this with our own time. So if you could give us a donation, there's links at the bottom for that as well. And I hope you've enjoyed the episode. Tune in a couple of weeks. We'll have something else for you. Thanks.